Thanks for tuning in to another installment of Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast that studies, analyzes, and celebrates women in television. Thousands of comedies, variety shows, and dramas and other events have aired, yet the presence of strong women, both in front of and behind the camera, is an experience we need to understand better and embrace. With an eye to aligning the leadership lesson, time capsule observation, or fascinating backstory of a show's success or failure, my goal of Advanced TV Herstory is to connect the treasures of the past to the great potential of today's TV and online platforms. Tomorrow's success is rooted in understanding what has come before us. So gear up for a little sociology, economics, strategy, storytelling, and fun. It's all here at Advanced TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. 45 years ago, The Mary Tyler Moore Show premiered. While that fact in itself merits a podcast of celebration, Advanced TV Herstory considers The Mary Tyler Moore Show to be a major chapter of study. Even a cursory look into the show's development and award-winning run reveals that there's a lot to learn from this show, its cast and crew. So this podcast represents a different approach to bringing the show into historical context. Namely, we're going to hear from author and entertainment expert Jennifer Keishin Armstrong. Armstrong, a graduate of Northwestern University's School of Journalism, is a seasoned writer with pretty excellent contacts honed through the years of writing in the entertainment industry. In 2013, Simon & Schuster published Armstrong's book about the writers and crew of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. It's called Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted, and All the Brilliant Minds Who Made The Mary Tyler Moore Show a Classic. My interview with Armstrong will form 3 podcasts in all. We covered a lot of ground, and you'll not only learn a lot from Armstrong and her first-hand accounts of conversations with talented writers and living legends like Betty White, but I am quite sure her infectious enthusiasm will cause you to fall in love with Mary and the gang all over again. In this installment, we're going to get to know Armstrong and her take on the women writers and what it was like for them in a male-dominated industry. For fun, Armstrong and I revisited what many believe is the single best episode of TV comedy ever. Why, yes, it was directed by a woman. Subsequent podcasts will focus specifically on the team of women writers, many of whom worked in pairs, and there was a special woman as well named Treva Silverman, and she, in and of herself, was a pioneer in the all-male writer's room of a sitcom. So grab your tam and head to 7th Street and Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis. All too often, we at Advanced TV Herstory tend to focus on the conflict and the strife that's led to change and successes for women in TV. This time, love is all around. Let's jump right into Armstrong's book, Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted. My copy currently has post-it tabs throughout the book because it really is a comprehensive look at the people who brought us this seminal show. Yes, there are other books that have been written about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, episode guides and the like, as well as bios and autobiographies of the stars themselves. But Armstrong has done her homework, and it shows. I asked her why, with a broad background and network in the entertainment industry, she chose to write this book about this topic.
I was a writer at Entertainment Weekly for about 10 years, and mostly covered television, a lot of which was, women's issues in television, that sort of thing. And it was also happened to be the rise of Tina Fey time, so I interviewed her a lot, plus a lot of other female comedians were kind of just really coming into their own at that time.
So, interviewing a whole host of women writers for TV, Armstrong had heard over and over that the Mary Tyler Moore Show held great influence. It was well written, the plot themes were relevant to a time of rapid change for American women, and the characters were very well developed, particularly so given the fact that it was a 30-minute show. What was in the secret sauce over at MTM? Could it have anything to do with the incredible number of women writers who worked on the show during its 7-year run?
It really was about the female writers at that point. Once I started just briefly looking into them, and this was only scratching the surface really as I found out later, just in even cursory research, you could just tell from the interviews that they'd done and the stories they told that they had a lot of stories, and that makes sense because young women working in comedy in the 1970s had to be kind of some badass bitches just to be thinking that that was even a possibility for them, that they weren't just going to become secretaries or get married straight out of college and become moms, all of which are wonderful things to do. But this took a lot of extra oomph to kind of even, think about being a comedy writer at that time as a woman.
If you work from this premise, which is available through the wonders of hindsight, that the Mary Tyler Moore Show transformed American culture, then the women writers had a lot to do with it. Armstrong came to realize that with women in the room, the style changed, but so did the approach to plots.
The women were very, very receptive. I think part of it is, and I've found this is true, it's not just a woman thing in this case, found it's true in general that the writers often don't get a lot of attention. It's like, the creator and the star might get attention, but people don't ask the writers, and they have a lot of stories, and a lot of their stories end up in the TV shows that we watch. And so they get pretty excited when you contact them.
Today we think of it as content, but in an industry stocked with male writers in the 70s, premium was placed on experience. When you read her book, you'll find that Armstrong recounts the story that's been retold in countless other formats from many other closely associated with the show, that even getting the show developed was no small feat. Actress Mary Tyler Moore was best known as Laura Petrie, Dick Van Dyke's TV wife from The Dick Van Dyke Show, which aired from 1961 to 1965. That show was about a married couple, but the show itself largely revolved around men. Van Dyke's physical humor carried the day, and it was a Herculean effort by TV executive Grant Tinker, who at the time was married to Mary Tyler Moore in real life, and the show's creators to launch a show in 1970 about a single professional woman who lived in Minneapolis. Need more proof? Listen closely to the aspirational paternalism contained in the opening lines of the original theme song. The end of that original opening posited, "You might just make it after all." This was 2 years before Title IX and the Equal Rights Amendment united women in their quest for equal access to education, job opportunities, and independence. I give Armstrong credit for calling out in her book the evolution of the opening line lyrics over the years. Words do matter. This show wasn't that far off from depicting the experience of any young woman in real life, as Armstrong explains, let alone the very writers who were writing the words.
The creators, who were men, James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, felt like it was a priority for them to have women in the writing room, and they will insist to this day that this was not some kind of great, brave feminist act or anything like that. It was very practical. They loved reality. They liked to have a sense of realism about their works, and this was their way of doing it. They just thought like, well, we don't know what it's like to be a woman in the 70s. We got to get some people who do. Therefore, we will hire some women. And they were driven by that. And because of it, they figured out how to just do this. It's so interesting, and it can still be so informative to us now when we're looking at diversity in our writers' rooms and other places, that these guys were just determined to do it, and they didn't see it as some great, act. It was just that they were like, we need this, so there's not a lot of women writers. We're going to hire the ones that there are, and we're going to mentor the ones that there could be. And that's just what they did.
So, 2 years before the U.S. Congress approved the Equal Rights Amendment as an addition to the American Constitution, subject to ratification by a majority of states, which actually never happened, a Hollywood studio door opened to women, and a significant task was handed to them.
You don't know when you sign up necessarily if it's early, but like once you get that credit at that time, everybody wanted somebody from MTM. And I think probably Mary Tyler Moore Show was the gold standard of the gold standard at that time. You know, it was still the standout show among all the shows that they had made, even though they made lots of good ones. Like I think Rhoda was great. You know, Bob Newhart, lots of other good things.
In her book, Armstrong tells the stories straight from the storytellers themselves. We'll get into the full list of women writers who wrote consistently for the show and the impact each had on it. But as writers, they were just one ingredient of the secret sauce. It can be said that assembling a cast of actors known for their commitment to the craft was another. And getting the written words to flow from the cast is a director's job. Women directors contributed to some of the series' most prominent episodes. But it all takes leadership and a culture that allows people to feel empowered to contribute. Armstrong spoke to the ambiance at MTM Productions.
You know, they had so many strong female actors on the show, all of these female writers, which, you know, that had to feel different. They were all used to being the only woman in the room. And now suddenly there's a bunch of women, and not only that, but they're all sort of, you know, they're all powerful and talented and have been given this opportunity, and a lot of good things are going on. Plus the women's movement is in like full bloom at that moment, you know? So I think there was definitely this sense of something serious going on here.
Next time you watch, look a little closer at the women's roles that appear throughout the course of the show. They were like nothing you had ever seen before, and each represented a sector of the burgeoning women's movement that needed a little face time. We needed to see ourselves, whether we were old or young, hip or suburban or rural. Mary Richards' journey toward confidence is the clear backbone of the show. She's actually bland enough that a lot of women probably could see themselves in her. And she was a little risk-averse, so that also reflected where we were in the women's movement in 1970. Rhoda's early metamorphosis and the role her character plays in Mary's evolution is the work of these women writers, and we'll get to that later. But why is it important? First, because the show featured a woman, and so the primary audience was nearly half of the entire constituency of TV watchers who had previously only seen themselves relegated to supporting roles in other TV shows. In 1970 and 1971, Mary was nearly the only game in town, and that was whether you were middle-aged or 14. In 1971, the year that All in the Family came along, well, am I more an Edith or a Gloria? In 1971, it's interesting to note that the Emmy Award nominations say it all. Here's what folks were watching and what the industry thought was the best on TV. In its first season on the air, and nobody can say that All in the Family wasn't a phenomenal, groundbreaking, deserving show. It earned the award for Outstanding Comedy Series. No question, totally earned. It was deserved. Its competition was a now forgotten show called Arnie, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Love American Style, and The Odd Couple. For leading actress in a comedy series, the Emmy Award went to Jean Stapleton for her portrayal as Edith Bunker on All in the Family. And that year, Jean Stapleton bested Mary Tyler Moore as Mary Richards and Marlo Thomas as Anne Marie on That Girl. For the Emmy for Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy, Valerie Harper scored as Rhoda Morgenstern, beating out the delightful and accomplished Agnes Moorehead, who played Endora on Bewitched, and Karen Valentine for her role as teacher Alice Johnson on Room 222. Now, in 1971, realism was starting to kick in. It was the last year of That Girl. Bewitched would sunset in 1972. Room 222, which was created by James L. Brooks a few years before he launched The Mary Tyler Moore Show, that lasted until 1974, and with its high school teen focus, served as a voice for issues of the day. So the next time you watch a single episode or binge a season of Mary Tyler Moore, think beyond the plot. Shine a feminist light on Sue Ann Nivens, the character from 1973 to the series' end, who was the older working woman. Sue Ann was the most sexually honest and aggressive. Sue Ann had made it on her own, or at least in her own way, and her sharp tongue was antithetical to everything that was Mary. We'll learn in the next podcast how Georgette came to be. Yes, from the mind of a woman. But in watching how others work with Georgette and how the writers built out her character, seriously, they never wasted a single line. You may see a glimpse of someone you know or someone you once worked with. So we've got Mary, Rhoda, Sue Ann, Georgette, all really solid lead or supporting characters, and that leaves us with Phyllis, played by Cloris Leachman. Phyllis appeared in 38 episodes and spun off into her own show, appropriately titled Phyllis. She was more than the wacky neighbor, which is a standard trope used in TV comedy long before 1970. As a married woman, sometimes happily and sometimes not so happily, Phyllis Lindstrom served as the other side of the fence for the times when Mary pondered just how badly she wanted to be married. Phyllis Lindstrom was the other end of the spectrum to Rhoda Morgenstern's happy and independence as a single woman. And you don't think that these weren't stories ripped from the headlines of every woman's magazine and those other magazines like Cosmo and Ms.? So as a married woman, Phyllis brought another relationship to TV that caused women viewers to take note. Phyllis and her teenage daughter Bess addressed storylines that stretched beyond single life or workplace situations. Armstrong and I discussed just how fresh and timeless Phyllis and Bess are.
How much do you love that? This is another one where we're like, we could talk all about Phyllis for a whole episode, but like the Phyllis Bess relationship is incredible, right? Like I wish we could have gotten more Phyllis because of that, you know, the show Phyllis, or I guess probably when Bess was still younger, it was better, but like, I loved that there's something so weird and fascinating, the way that she calls her mother by her first name. And like Phyllis is trying to raise this, you know, enlightened woman. But yeah, sometimes they'll still like wear matching outfits. They're fascinating.
Bess, played by Lisa Gerritsen, only appeared in 10 episodes before transferring in 1975 over to that same role in the spin-off Phyllis. In this scene from a first season episode, Phyllis believes her husband, the dermatologist Lars, has chickenpox. To protect Bess from exposure, Mary takes in Bess for a few days. And it's in that time period that Bess, too, gets to experience the distinct difference between Mary's youth and independence, that single gal life, versus her own mother's somewhat sharp, overbearing, eager to please personality.
It was an error when he thought he had varicella.
Chickenpox.
All he has is Rooster Versalova.
Translation, please.
Poison oak. Hi, Phyllis. Oh, get your things, dear. Mother's here to take you home.
I don't want to go home.
What?
I don't want to go home.
Oh, Phyllis, she doesn't mean that. As soon as you get her home, she's going to...
Oh, no. I wouldn't force her, Mary. We encourage her independence. If this is where she wants to be, this is where you want to be, is it, Bess?
But Phyllis...
No, Mary, you don't understand. If Bess wants this, this is what you want, Bess. Well, it's obviously her wish to stay here, so is it your wish, Bess? Then this is where she'll stay.
Did Phyllis get the feeling that the women's movement was leaving her behind, maybe? Or that things were just happening way too fast for her to be raising the daughter that she wanted to have? But all of those issues, too, are an evolution, and they created the spin-off TV show Phyllis, and it serves as perhaps one woman's story of breakout. So yes, some of us could talk about the Phyllis show as kindred spirits who appreciate well-written comedy. Because if four men in suits can sit at a desk all day long on a Sunday afternoon dissecting football plays, then there's room for feminists, historians, writers, and funny people to poke around the edges of any character Cloris Leachman has brought to life. At 89, that woman can still deliver. Armstrong and I lamented that both the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Rhoda have not been released in full series boxed DVD sets yet. Rather, seasons are available each on their own. Phyllis is not available at all, except in perhaps what is a pirated format, so beware of that. And the hour-long drama spin-off Lou Grant is similarly not available on DVD. My greatest lasting impression of that show was the episode when CRTs were introduced into the Tribune's newsroom. CRT, an acronym of cathode ray tube, was the initial word used for what we know today to be a monitor. Lou always did have a hard time coping with change. My conversation with Armstrong ran the gamut, and the next podcast about the women writers and writing teams crosses themes of style of humor, how their own personal experiences fed plot lines, and the degree to which the MTM pedigree affected their careers. But before we get on to that in-depth look at the writing talent, I want to share Armstrong's insight into the famous episode entitled Chuckles Bites the Dust. It aired in 1975, which was Season 6, Episode 7, and is available on YouTube. I wouldn't blame you one bit, right now, if, after listening to this podcast, you pull it up and enjoy it in a whole new way. You should know that the episode was directed by a woman, Joan Darling. Actually, it turned out to be her first directing assignment with the show, or of any shows. And while we go on to discuss the genius who developed the Mary Tyler Moore Show cast, a woman named Ethel Wynant, Armstrong describes the Chuckles episode as an example of excellence in all categories.
And one of the great things about the casting of the show in general, which this just brings out, and several other episodes do too, almost everyone in the cast had either before that shown pretty dramatic chops as well, in other work, or in Mary's case, we saw it later that she was an incredible dramatic actress as well when she did things like Ordinary People. So they had both sides really well. I mean, it was to the point where like Ethel Wynant had to fight for people like Ed Asner. She had to fight for because he was such a great known dramatic quantity, but not comedy. So having both in episodes like this is what makes that show really, really special, is when they can do stuff like that.
For anyone who hasn't seen the episode, the premise is very basic. Chuckles the Clown was a local children's TV character, part of the WJM team. The episode begins with Ted Baxter absolutely giddy that he's been asked to be in the circus parade. Lou bats him down and tells him he can't, and they send Chuckles instead.
28 people condominiumless. Big deal. Now, word from one of our sponsors.
What's the matter with him?
Oh, he's still angry over Chuckles leading the circus parade today instead of him. And I'll tell you something more, I don't blame him.
Oh, come on, Mary. You're going to be reasonable now, aren't you? You're going to be fair and look at both sides of things and see Ted's point of view.
I mean it, Mert. You know how close Ted came to quitting his job over this?
Not close enough.
Oh, my. Oh, dear.
Mr. Grant?
Oh, Lord.
Mr. Grant?
Something terrible has happened.
What is it, Lou?
Someone we all know is dead.
What? Who?
No, I won't tell you about it now. I don't want to upset you.
Mr. Grant!
Where's Ted? I got to tell Ted.
He's on the air. Well, what happened, Lou? Who died? Will you tell us?
Chuckles. Chuckles the clown is dead. It was a freak accident. He went to the parade dressed as Peter Peanut. And a rogue elephant tried to shell him. I gotta get this on the air. where you start working on the formal obituary. Chuckles' real name was George. His wife's name is Louise. The elephant's name is Jucko.
WJM anchorman Ted Baxter is not known for his ability to ad-lib on the news. That would require more knowledge about something than he had, so he does his best.
Murray is working on a formal obituary for tomorrow. You go on now and you'll just have to ad-lib something. What'll I say? I hardly know the man. Well, sure you did. You knew him. You were on his show.
Well, it's hard to know a man is chasing you around with a rubber chicken.
Ted, just say something short and simple and warm. You can do it. We're counting on you.
Don't worry, I won't let you down.
Ladies and gentlemen, sad news. One of our most beloved entertainers and close personal friend of mine is dead. Chuckles, the clown, died today from...
He died a broken man. Chuckles leaves a wife. At least I assume he was married. He didn't seem like the other kind. I don't know his age, but I guess he was probably in his early 60s. It's kind of hard to judge a guy's face, especially when he's wearing big lips and a light bulb for a mouth. But he had his whole life in front of him, except for the 60-some-odd years he already lived. I remember Chuckles used to recite a poem at the end of each program. It was called The Credo of a Clown. I'd like to offer it now in his memory. A little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants.
If you listen closely, you can appreciate the sense of timing that each performer brings to the scenes. You can also hear laughter, and that's because every episode was produced before a live audience. Armstrong discussed with me how Joan Darling landed the opportunity to direct this particular episode, and she goes into greater detail in her book about the actual taping experience.
And because this episode became so famous, like this is definitely the most famous episode of the show. I once did a list of the best Mary Tyler Moore Show episodes for New York Magazine's website, and we actually just decided to do like best episodes that aren't Chuckles, because like we're all just going to stipulate on Chuckles. We know that it's one of the best sitcom episodes of all time. So huge deal. And so in retrospect, like this story got all twisted around too. So Joan Darling did get to direct this, which is awesome because she's a woman. And again, if there were no female writers in comedy, there certainly were also no female directors. So it was great she got this resume line. There were all of these legends attached to the fact that it was not their regular director, Jay Sandrich, on this episode. He was very adamant. Like when I talked to him, he was like, there is one thing that I need you to clear up. And everybody thought it was because he had objected to this script being about laughing at a funeral, when in fact he claims, and I have no reason to doubt him, that it was just that he had a few weeks off every season to like go do other stuff or whatever, and that he chose that because he had been given the choice between that and some episode that had someone on it that he knew as a co-star, and he was like, oh, that'd be cool to hang out with that person, I'll do that one. So he claims that that had nothing to do with his own feelings about this. But it's cool that the upshot was that they got a woman to direct the episode, and she probably didn't really know what she was getting into. No one knew at the time that this was going to be, you never know. I don't think you ever know when you're shooting a show like this. Like, oh, this is probably going to be our most important episode. They knew it was different. They knew that they were working extra hard to make it work and not laugh at the wrong times and laugh at the right times. But I don't think they knew that they were like making history at that time. So, you know, this woman got this great, you know, not only just to direct a Mary Tyler Moore Show episode, but the seminal one. So it's pretty cool.
For Darling, the challenge came in delivering the funeral scene. That's how the show ends. Here's how Armstrong describes a mission that required everybody to be at their best.
You know, the setup is that they're all making jokes about this clown and how he was killed by an elephant because the clown was dressed as a peanut. So they're all making jokes, and Mary is insisting that it's not funny and they shouldn't be laughing. And of course, the final thing is that they go to the funeral and she starts cracking up and can't stop. So yeah, that was the big, so it's all about these contrasts, right? And so Mary had to be super, super serious all of the time until she wasn't. And that her crack up is pretty spectacular. Like it's a really wonderful, acting moment for her. And yeah, she was like, you can't look at me at all. Like she couldn't make eye contact with people while they were shooting the other parts because she wanted to keep cracking up. And she was both like, obviously you don't want to be doing that. And she's trying to kind of like save it because she couldn't just be like normal in those scenes. She had to be like super serious. So yeah, there was a lot of there's a lot of craziness. And I think they knew, I mean, I said they didn't know they were making history, which I think is true, but they knew it was like a weird acting situation and that it was an unusual script. They knew that most, shows at that time were not making jokes about death and that they were taking a chance. So, I think there was a lot of adrenaline around that, plus the fact that like Mary had to be the exact opposite of everyone else, essentially, at any given time. She had to be serious when everyone was laughing, and she had to crack up when everyone was being serious. And then everybody else around her in that scene has to like not be cracking up because it's not as funny unless she's cracking up all by herself. So I think that was an extremely, challenging directing situation. It wasn't just like, oh, this is a completely normal episode and we're running on normal. They were a very, very professional group, especially by that time. They had it down. So like this woman could have gotten any other episode and it would have been like, I barely have to do anything. But, this was sort of a big deal on multiple levels.
Joan Darling has a robust IMDb page, which chronicles her work as an actress going all the way back to the early 60s. Following her inaugural shot at directing, how seriously can you ever expect to do better than Chuckles Bites the Dust? She went on to direct episodes in Rhoda, Doogie Howser, MD, MASH, Mary Hartman, and a bunch more. 45 years after it aired, The Mary Tyler Moore Show is a testament to the power of opportunity. It was the belief by the show's creators, James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, that women writers would make the show real and relevant. Joan Darling, presented with the opportunity to direct a quirky episode about the death of a clown, delivered a masterpiece. So we'll learn how other women took their roles seriously too, utilizing all they had learned from the industry or from life to make their mark on the show. But right now, today, buy the book Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted, written by Jennifer Keishin Armstrong, published in 2013 by Simon & Schuster. Advanced TV Herstory is very grateful that this book tells the story in such rich detail. And what is Armstrong's next project?
I have finished work on a book about Seinfeld called Seinfeldia, which will be out next July, so July of 16. I'm very excited about it. I like it a lot. And you can find me and all kinds of information about Mary and Lou and Seinfeldia at jenniferkarmstrong.com.
My thanks to Jennifer for agreeing to an interview. Show clips from this installment of Advanced TV Herstory are taken from The Mary Tyler Moore Show, either via DVD format or, in the case of the Chuckles episode, from YouTube. Stay tuned for more MTM and the fantastic women writers who made it so successful. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Thanks for listening.